September 8th, 1962. Exactly 6:47 a.m. The bread arrived at Bumpy Johnson's brownstone every Saturday morning. Same time, same baker, same brown paper bag with the top folded down twice, crisp and neat, like a promise kept. Inside, 2 loaves of sourdough, crust the color of autumn leaves, crumb white as fresh snow, still warm from the oven. The kind of bread that made the whole house smell like Sunday morning even though it was Saturday. Bumpy tore off a piece from the first loaf, the way he always did. Didn't bother with a knife. Just pulled the bread apart with his hands, felt the steam escape, brought it to his mouth, bit down, and felt something crack between his molars that had no business being in bread. Not a piece of grain, not a nut, not a seed. Something sharp, something angular, something that felt like biting down on winter. Bumpy stopped chewing, didn't spit, didn't swallow, just held the bread in his mouth, feeling with his tongue what his teeth had discovered. He moved the piece of bread to the side of his mouth, pressed it against his cheek. Then, slowly, carefully, he reached up and removed it, held it in his palm. Tiny fragments of glass glittered in the morning light, no bigger than grains of sand, ground so fine they were almost invisible, mixed into the dough like they belonged there. 23 years of surviving in a world designed to kill him had taught Bumpy Johnson one fundamental truth. The first warning is the only warning you get. He set the bread down on the kitchen table, called out to Mamie, who was in the parlor reading the morning paper. "Don't eat the bread." She appeared in the doorway, reading glasses perched on her nose. "What's wrong with it?" Bumpy held out his palm. The glass fragments caught the light, turned it into tiny rainbows. "Beautiful. Deadly. Someone's trying to kill me from the inside out." Mamie's face went pale. "Lord have mercy. Who brought this?" "Same person who's brought it every Saturday for the last 4 years. Walter Green, the baker from 142nd Street. Bumpy walked to the sink, spat out the rest of the bread, rinsed his mouth 3 times. Watched the water swirl down the drain, pink tinged with blood from where the glass had cut the inside of his cheek. "Get Juno," he said quietly. "Annette, tell them I need them here within the hour. Tell them it's about the bread. Ellsworth." "Now, Mamie." She went. Bumpy stood at the kitchen window, looking out at Harlem waking up. Street vendors setting up their carts. Children heading to school. Old men sitting on stoops, watching the world go by like they've been doing for 50 years. Somewhere out there, Walter Green was in his bakery, mixing flour and water and yeast and betrayal, creating masterpieces that were designed to shred a man's insides into ribbons so fine they couldn't be stitched back together. For years, every Saturday, 2 loaves, never late, never stale, never poisoned, until today. The question wasn't who put the glass in the bread. That was obvious. The question was why. And Bumpy Johnson had until sunset to find out. Because by this time tomorrow, Walter Green would either be dead or wishing he was. The only question was which. Bumpy's parlor, 8:23 a.m. Juno Brown arrived first, still wearing his night clothes, a .38 special tucked into his waistband. Nat Pettigrew came 15 minutes later, notebook already open, pen already moving. Bumpy laid the glass fragments on a white napkin in the center of the coffee table. Under the morning light streaming through the window, they looked like crushed diamonds. Precious and lethal. "Ground glass," he said, "mixed into the sourdough. Fine enough to pass for grain texture. Coarse enough to do damage." Juno leaned forward, studied the fragments without touching them. "If you'd swallowed. Internal bleeding. Slow. Painful. Could take days to kill me. Long enough that no one would connect it to the bread. Just another old man dying from stomach problems." Walter Green, Nat said, flipping through his notes. Age 51. Owns Green's Bakery on 142nd and Adam Clayton Powell. Been in business for 19 years. Widower. 2 daughters, both grown and married. No debts. No vices. Pays his rent on time. Donates bread to Mount Olivet Baptist Church every Sunday. Which makes him either the least likely person to try to kill me, Bumpy said, or the perfect cover. "Any movement from rival families?" Juno asked. "Anyone putting pressure on local businesses?" Nat shook his head. Nothing unusual. The Italians have been quiet since the Gallo brothers got arrested. Costello's people stay downtown. Bonanno's focused on his own problems. There's no territorial push happening. Then it's personal. Bumpy stood, walked to the window. Walter's been baking my bread for 4 years. Every Saturday. Never problem. Never complaint. So what changed? Maybe nothing changed, Juno suggested. Maybe this was always the plan. Get close. Build trust. Wait for the perfect moment. 4 years is a long time to wait. Revenge is patient. The word hung in the air like smoke. Revenge. The oldest currency in the world. The debt that never expires. Bumpy turned from the window. Nat, I need you to dig into Walter's history. Not just the last few years. Go back 20 years. 30 if you have to. I need to know if I've ever crossed paths with him. If I've ever done something to his family. Something that would make him wait 4 years to poison my bread. On it. Juno. I want to know who Walter's been talking to. Who's been in his bakery. Who's been buying bread at odd hours. Who's been asking questions about me. You want me to bring him in? Not yet. Bumpy's voice was cold. Controlled. First we watch. First we learn. Then we teach. September 8th, 2:34 p.m. Nat returned with a folder so thick it barely closed. Inside were birth certificates, marriage licenses, property deeds, police reports, and photographs that spanned 3 decades. Bumpy read through it all in silence. The story of Walter Green unfolded page by page, year by year, like watching a life in reverse. Walter had been born in South Carolina in 1911, moved to Harlem in 1929, right before the Depression hit. Worked as a baker's apprentice for 12 years before opening his own shop in 1943. Married a woman named Dorothy in 1945. Had 2 daughters. Lost Dorothy to pneumonia in 1957. Lived a quiet life. Paid his taxes. Minded his business. The kind of man who left no footprints in history except for the bread he baked. But buried in the middle of the file was a single photograph that made Bumpy's hand stop turning pages. A young man, maybe 19 years old, smiling, wearing an army uniform, standing in front of Green's bakery with his arm around Walter's shoulder. The caption on the back, written in fading ink. Raymond Green, home on leave, March 1952. Bumpy held up the photograph. Who's Raymond? Nat's face was grim. Walter's nephew, his sister's only child. Raised him after his mother died of TB in 1948. Loved him like a son. Where is he now? Dead. Killed March 17th, 1952. Shot in an alley behind a pool hall on 139th Street. The air in the parlor went cold. Who killed him? Nat didn't answer immediately. His silence said everything. Who, Nat? We did. Or more specifically, one of Juno's men. A soldier named Marcus Tate. He was collecting protection money from the pool hall. Raymond was there, lost big at cards, owed money he couldn't pay. Mouthed off when Marcus came to collect. Marcus didn't like his tone. Bumpy set the photograph down carefully, like it might shatter. And Raymond, shot twice in the chest, left in the alley. Took him 40 minutes to die. By the time the police showed up, Marcus was long gone. Case went cold. No witnesses. No arrests. And Walter buried his nephew 3 days later. Quiet funeral. 20 people. Closed casket. Nat paused. Went back to work the next Monday like nothing had happened. 10 years ago, Bumpy said quietly, Raymond died 10 years ago. And Walter's been waiting all this time. Not just waiting, Juno corrected. Planning. He didn't start delivering bread to you until 1958. 6 years after Raymond died. That's not revenge. That's a campaign. Bumpy picked up the photograph again. Studied Raymond's face. Young. Smiling. Full of a future he'd never see. Killed over gambling debts and disrespect. Killed by a man who worked for Bumpy. Killed in Bumpy's territory, under Bumpy's protection, in a war that Bumpy commanded. Marcus Tate, Bumpy said. Where is he now? Dead. Killed in 1955 during a robbery gone wrong. Unrelated to Raymond. So Walter can't get to the man who pulled the trigger. But he can get to the man who gave the orders. Bumpy set the photograph down. He can get to me. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Tick, 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 like a countdown. What do we do? Juno asked. Bumpy stood, walked to the window. Harlem stretched out below him, all brick and asphalt, and lives layered on top of lives. Raymond Green was one of 1,000 young men who died in these streets. One of 1,000 debts that Bumpy had never paid because he'd never known they existed. We go to the bakery, Bumpy said quietly. Tonight, after closing, just me and Walter and the truth. And then we see if bread can be used for more than killing. September 8th, 11:52 p.m. Green's Bakery closed at 6 p.m. on Saturdays. By midnight, the lights were off, the oven's cold, the street outside empty except for a few drunks stumbling home from the Lenox Lounge. Bumpy stood outside the front door, Juno beside him, both men dressed in dark suits that blended into the September night. The bakery window displayed tomorrow's goods, rolls, baguettes, pastries arranged like art. Behind the glass, Walter's life's work on display for the world to see. Bumpy knocked 3 times. Slow, deliberate. No answer. He knocked again. A light flickered on in the back room. Footsteps. Slow, hesitant. Then Walter Green appeared behind the glass door, wearing a white undershirt and flour-dusted pants, holding a rolling pin like a weapon. When he saw Bumpy, the rolling pin clattered to the floor. Bumpy gestured for him to open the door. Walter's hands shook as he unlocked it, pulled it open, stood there in the threshold like a man facing his own execution. Mr. Johnson, I wasn't expecting. I know. Bumpy stepped inside. Juno followed, closing and locking the door behind them. You were expecting me to be dead by now. Or dying. Internal bleeding. Stomach shredded. Begging for mercy that would never come. Walter's face went white. His lips moved, but no sound came out. The glass in the bread, Walter, ground so fine it almost looked like part of the flour. Almost. Bumpy walked deeper into the bakery, his footsteps echoing on the tile floor. Alcatraz taught me to be careful with my food, to look for things that don't belong, to trust my instincts before my hunger. He stopped in front of the counter where Walter had spent 19 years creating beauty from flour and water. You've been planning this for a long time, haven't you? For years of delivering perfect bread. For years of building trust. For years of waiting for the perfect moment to poison me. Walter's knees buckled. He grabbed the counter to keep from falling. How did you know? Because I tasted it. And because I asked questions. And because I found out about Raymond. The name hit Walter like a fist. His face crumpled. Tears spilled down his cheeks. He was my sister's boy. I raised him after she died. He was 19 years old. 19. His whole life ahead of him. And Marcus Tate took it away over a gambling debt. Your man. Your territory. Your fault. Walter's voice cracked. You let animals like Marcus Tate run wild in Harlem. You gave them permission to kill over money. Over disrespect. Over nothing. You're right. Walter blinked. What? You're right. Bumpy's voice was quiet. Almost gentle. Marcus Tate was an animal. And I let him operate in my territory. I gave him protection. I took a percentage of the money he collected. I'm as responsible for Raymond's death as if I pulled the trigger myself. Walter stared at him, confusion cutting through the grief. But that doesn't excuse what you did, Walter. Doesn't justify putting glass in my bread. Doesn't make it right to try to kill me slowly, painfully from the inside out. You deserved it. Maybe. Probably. Bumpy nodded. But you failed. And now we're here. In your bakery. At midnight. And you know what happens next. Juno stepped forward, reaching inside his coat. Wait. Walter held up his hands. Before whatever you're going to do, I just want you to know one thing. What? I'm not sorry. I'd do it again. Every loaf. Every Saturday. Every piece of glass. His voice was steady now. Strong. You took Raymond from me. You took the only family I had left. And I try to take you from the world the same way. Slow. Painful. From the inside. Bumpy studied him for a long moment. Saw the truth in his eyes. The hate. The grief. The absolute refusal to apologize for trying to murder the man responsible for his nephew's death. You loved him, Bumpy said quietly. More than anything. And you'd sacrifice everything to avenge him. Your business. Your freedom. Your life. Without hesitation. Bumpy walked to the window, looked out at Harlem sleeping under a September moon. Somewhere out there, Raymond Green was buried in an unmarked grave. Just another young man who died too soon in a city that ate its children and never stopped to mourn. "Juno," Bumpy said, not turning from the window. "Go to the back. Bring me flour, water, yeast, and salt." "What?" "Do it." Juno disappeared into the back room. Walter stood frozen, not understanding, not daring to hope. When Juno returned with the ingredients, Bumpy took off his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves, turned to Walter. "Teach me to make bread." Walter stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "What?" "Teach me to make bread. The same sourdough you've been delivering to my house for 4 years. Show me every step, every ingredient, every secret. Mr. Johnson, I don't. Do it, or Juno does what he came here to do." Walter's hands trembled as he tied on a clean apron. Bumpy did the same. They stood side by side at the prep counter, the ingredients laid out between them like weapons in a war neither man wanted to fight. "Sourdough starts with the starter," Walter said quietly. His voice was mechanical, distant, a culture of wild yeast and bacteria. "I've been feeding mine for 17 years. Every day, without fail." He retrieved a large glass jar from the refrigerator. Inside, a thick, bubbly mixture that smelled like wine and earth and time. You feed it flour and water. Equal parts. Let ferment. The yeast eats the sugars, produces carbon dioxide, creates the structure that makes bread rise. Walter measured out the starter with practiced precision. Without the starter, there's no bread. Just dense, dead dough. Bumpy watched, learned. His hands followed Walter's movements. Now the flour. Bread flour. High protein content. Creates gluten when you work it. Gluten is what gives bread its structure, its strength. Walter added flour to the starter. Too little, the bread falls apart. Too much, it turns to concrete. He added water, salt, mixed it with his hands until it formed a rough, shaggy mass. Now you knead it. 8 minutes. No shortcuts. The gluten has to develop. The dough has to transform from a sticky mess into something smooth and elastic. Bumpy began kneading. His hands, which had held guns and knives and the throats of men who'd betrayed him, now worked flour and water into submission. Push, fold, turn, repeat. Walter watched, corrected his technique, showed him how to feel when the dough was ready. Now it rests. First rise. 4 hours at room temperature. The yeast needs time to work, to create the air pockets that make bread light instead of dense. They covered the dough with a damp cloth, stood on opposite sides of the counter. Neither man spoke. The clock on the wall ticked. Midnight became 1 a.m. 1 became 2. Finally, Walter broke the silence. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I need to understand." Bumpy's voice was quiet. "Not just how you made the bread, but why. Why you waited 4 years. Why you chose glass instead of poison. Why you put something so deadly into something so beautiful. You know why. I know the facts. I don't know the feeling." Bumpy met his eyes. "I've killed men, Walter. More than I can count. More than I can remember. But I've never killed someone slowly. Never made them suffer without knowing it was coming." Raymond suffered, bled out in an alley for 40 minutes. Alone, in the dark. No one to hold his hand. No one to tell him it would be okay. "And you wanted me to die the same way. Slowly. Painfully. Alone." Yes. The dough had risen. Bumpy punched it down, shaped it into a loaf, placed it in a proofing basket. Walter showed him how to score the top, create the pattern that would let steam escape during baking. Second rise. 2 hours. Then it goes in the oven. 450 degrees. 35 minutes. The crust forms. The crumb sets. The bread becomes itself. They waited. The sky outside lightened from black to gray. Dawn approaching. At 5:47 a.m., Bumpy placed the loaf in the oven. Closed the door. Watched through the window as the dough transformed. 35 minutes later, he removed it. Perfect. Golden. Beautiful. He set it on the cooling rack. The bread crackled and sang, the crust contracting, the steam escaping, the sound like a living thing. Walter stared at it, at the bread Bumpy had made with his own hands, at the craft he'd spent 19 years perfecting. now replicated by the man he'd tried to kill. It's perfect, Walter whispered. I know. Bumpy removed the apron, rolled down his sleeves. And now you're going to eat it. Walter's face went pale. What? You heard me. This bread, the one I just made, under your instruction, with your starter, in your oven. You're going to eat it. Every crumb. Right here. Right now. But I didn't put glass in that one. I watched you make it. There's nothing. I know. Bumpy's voice was hard now. Cold. But you don't know that for certain, do you? You didn't watch every second. Didn't see every ingredient. For all you know, while you were telling me about the gluten development, I slipped something into the dough. Understanding dawned in Walter's eyes. Horror followed. You're going to make me eat it. Make me wonder if every bite contains the same glass I try to feed you. Exactly. Juno set a knife on the counter. Walter picked it up with trembling hands. Cut into the loaf. The crust shattered perfectly. The crumb was white, airy, exactly as it should be. He cut a slice, held it up to the light, looked for irregularities, fragments, anything that didn't belong. Found nothing. Eat, Bumpy commanded. Walter brought the bread to his mouth. Hesitated. Every bite you take, you'll wonder. Is this the one? Is this where the glass is hiding? Will I feel it crack between my teeth, or will it be so fine I won't notice until my stomach starts to bleed? Please, Mr. Johnson, I understand. I eat. Walter bit into the bread, chewed slowly, carefully, tasting not just flour and yeast, but fear. The same fear he'd tried to create in Bumpy. The same uncertainty. The same helplessness. He swallowed. Nothing. Cut another piece. Another bite. The bread was perfect. Safe. Delicious. But Walter's hands shook with every slice. That's what you tried to give me, Bumpy said quietly. Not death. Uncertainty. Terror disguised as normalcy. A meal that should nourish, transformed into a weapon I wouldn't see coming. Walter ate. Slowly. Mechanically. Each bite harder than the last. Not because of the bread itself, but because of what it represented. When the loaf was gone, consumed down to the last crumb, Walter sat at the counter with tears streaming down his face. There was no glass, was there? No. Bumpy stood. But now you know how it feels. To eat something that could kill you. To chew and swallow and wait for pain that may or may not come. He walked to the door, stopped at the threshold. You're leaving New York, Walter. Tonight. Juno will drive you to the bus station. There's a ticket waiting for you. Philadelphia. And cash. Enough to start over. Why? Why not just kill me? Bumpy turned. His face was weary. Because Raymond didn't deserve to die. And killing you won't bring him back. All it does is add another body to a pile that's already too high. So, what happens to the bakery? I'm buying it. Going to turn it into a community kitchen. Free bread for families who can't afford it. In Raymond's name. Walter's eyes widened. Your nephew died over a gambling debt in my territory. That's on me. I can't change the past. Can't bring Raymond back. But I can make sure his name means something other than a boy who died too young in an alley. Bumpy opened the door. Dawn light spilled into the bakery. The bus leaves in 2 hours. Be on it. If I see you north of Philadelphia, there won't be a conversation. Just consequences. Are we clear? Walter nodded. Couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. One more thing. Bumpy paused. At Woodlawn Cemetery, Section 14, Plot 247, there's going to be a headstone by the end of the month. Marble. Raymond's name. His dates. And words that matter. What words? Loved by Walter. Remembered by all. Bumpy walked out into the September morning, Juno behind him. Behind them, Walter Green sat alone in his bakery, surrounded by the tools of his trade and the weight of what he'd tried to do. By noon, he was on a bus to Philadelphia. By the end of the week, Green's bakery had been transformed into Raymond's kitchen, serving free bread to families in Harlem who couldn't afford it. And in Woodlawn Cemetery, a new headstone appeared. Raymond Green, 1933 to 1952, loved by Walter, remembered by all. The story spread through Harlem like the smell of fresh bread. By the end of September, every baker, every cook, every person who worked with food knew what had happened at Green's bakery. The details multiplied with each telling. Some said Walter had been forced to eat 100 loaves of glass lace bread. Others claimed he'd been baked alive in his own oven. A few swore he'd simply disappeared, ground into flour and scattered in the Hudson River. But the truth was simpler and more powerful. Bumpy Johnson had caught the man who tried to poison him, had confronted him, had shown a mercy where none was deserved, had transformed revenge into redemption, and turned a bakery built on betrayal into a kitchen that fed the hungry. At the Cotton Club, a small-time numbers runner named Eddie Coleman told anyone who'd listen, "Bumpy Johnson is the only man in Harlem who can turn your murder attempt into your memorial." At the Lenox Lounge, Stephanie St. Clair, the numbers queen herself, raised a glass to Bumpy's photograph on the wall. Most men would have killed Walter Green. Bumpy made him make bread. That's why he's the godfather, and the rest of you are just soldiers. In Philadelphia, Walter Green found work as a dishwasher at a small restaurant on Market Street. His hands, which had created art from flour and water for 19 years, now scrubbed plates and pots in steaming water that turned his fingers red. He never baked again. Couldn't bring himself to touch dough without thinking of Bumpy Johnson standing beside him at the counter, learning the craft Walter had tried to corrupt. Some nights, when the restaurant closed and he was alone with the steam and the silence, he would think about Raymond, about the glass and the bread, about the loaf Bumpy had made him eat, every bite filled with the terror Walter had tried to create. And he would wonder if mercy was just another form of punishment, one that lasted longer than any bullet or blade ever could. 6 months later, Bumpy visited Raymond's kitchen on a Saturday morning, unannounced, alone, just another man in a three-piece suit walking through the Harlem streets. The kitchen was bustling. Volunteers were pulling fresh loaves from the ovens, distributing them to families lined up outside. Children, mothers, old men who'd lived through 2 wars and a depression. All of them receiving bread. Free. No questions asked. Bumpy stood in the doorway and watched. A young woman named Sarah, who'd taken over as head baker, spotted him, walked over. "Mr. Johnson, we weren't expecting you." "I know. Just wanted to see how things were going. We're feeding about 200 families a week now. More during the winter. The donations keep coming in. People want to help." She paused. "It's a good thing you're doing here. It's not my thing. It's Raymond's. I never knew him." "Neither did I." Bumpy watched a mother leave with 2 loaves of bread, her children trailing behind her like ducklings. But his uncle loved him enough to try to kill me. And that kind of love deserves to be remembered. He turned to leave, stopped at the threshold. "Keep the ovens running, Sarah. Keep the bread coming. As long as there's hunger in Harlem, Raymond's kitchen stays open." "Yes, sir." Bumpy walked out into the March sunshine. Spring coming. The city waking up after a long winter. Somewhere in Philadelphia, Walter Green was probably washing dishes, thinking about the nephew he'd lost and the revenge that had cost him everything. And somewhere in Woodlawn Cemetery, Raymond Green's headstone caught the morning light, the marble bright and clean, the carved words visible from 20 feet away. "Loved by Walter, remembered by all." Mamie was waiting for him at home, reading the Saturday paper, a pot of coffee on the stove. "How was the kitchen?" "Good. Busy. Making a difference." Bumpy sat down heavily, the weight of the morning settling on his shoulders like a coat. "You did a good thing, Ellsworth. Turning Walter's hate into something that helps people. I didn't do it for Walter. I did it for Raymond. For all the Raymond Greens who've died in Harlem over money and pride and stupid decisions made by men like me." He poured himself coffee, took a sip. "You can't save them all," Mamie said gently. "No, but maybe I can remember them. Make sure their names mean something more than just another body in an alley." He looked out the window at Harlem. His kingdom. His responsibility. His burden. The bread Walter made was perfect. Every loaf. Every Saturday. For years of perfection hiding murder. Bumpy set down his cup. "Makes you wonder how many other perfect things in this world are designed to kill you. That's a dark thought. It's a true thought." He stood. "But sometimes the darkest things can be transformed into light. Walter tried to kill me with bread. Now his nephew's name feeds the hungry. That's not redemption, but it's something." He walked to the door, stopped at the threshold. "I'm going to visit Raymond's grave. Again. I go every month. Make sure the flowers are fresh. Make sure someone remembers. He put on his hat. It's the least I can do for a boy who died because of my war. Look, if this story cut different, you already know what to do. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Turn on notifications. We're dropping these Bumpy Johnson stories every day. And trust me, the next one is even crazier. Drop a comment and let me know what you think. Was Bumpy right to spare Walter? Should the glass in the bread have had a different ending? Was turning the bakery into a charity enough? Or should closing time have been permanent? And remember, in Harlem, the ovens had secrets. The bread had history. And Bumpy Johnson always found a way to transform betrayal into something that mattered. One loaf at a time.